Good morning. I think we can start. I was just waiting a few minutes for any people who are coming in a little later. They'll jump in. I hope you can all hear me and also see the screen. As we continue with session two, yesterday we spent a lot of time on defining the problem as well as on the project design. So today is when we jump into, as we mentioned, the actual proposal writing. We'll start today. And all this is in the context of the proposal call we're working on, but also in general, what is useful to you for other calls that are up. I just want to put this up as well. Just sort of note that URL. We also have a website at UbuntuNet that we run where you can get information on grant funding. This is constantly updated. So there's a lot of up-to-date information there as well. I'll also put the URL on the chat. 1 second. And therefore, just feel free to access it. It requires you to create an account just so that it knows who you are and be able to send information relevant to you, but doesn't cost you anything. Absolutely free to use as well. That number should be updated. It's saying at the end of 25. We're now over 2,000 active users in the countries that you can see indicated as well. So feel free to go there also for looking for other opportunities in terms of grants that could be available. Just a reminder, if you didn't get it yesterday, or if you're new today, that everything that we discuss is available on the book. That is available free. I'll put the link on the chat for somebody says, please share the link. I've just posted it on the chat. That has the previous website. But I'm also now putting as a reminder so that it's there during our discussion. The link for the text that is also available free to download, for which most of the information I am discussing is based on UbuntuNet.net. And also, sorry, I'm just typing also. From Play Store. So you can also download it from Play Store, searching for UbuntuNet and Tome. Okay. All right. So let us proceed. Yesterday we did problem definition, project design. Today we'll focus all our attention on writing the actual proposal and refinement. Remember that the proposal came in, the one that we're focusing on this particular call, defines the sections. So you can't just create any section heading that you would like. In this presentation, we'll talk about the general sections that are typically in a proposal, and later on we'll show how you can match them. Whenever you have a proposal where the sections are defined, doesn't match the general layout of proposals, it's relatively simple just to match what should go where. But the key thing is that all the core aspects are always included, whether the headings are prescribed or not, because these are some of the things that funders are looking for. So we'll outline the key sections of a grant proposal, what should be included in each section, and the order in which they should be written, which is not the order in which they appear. And then we'll talk a little bit about the refinement. Once you have a full draft, just some suggestions on how to polish it before you submit it. Typically, these are sections that you find in a proposal: a title and executive summary, overall goal, background and rationale, significance and impact, methodology, work plan, key personnel, budget. Again, the headings names may vary. I've noted the issue of recording to share. I'd ask it to be shared. I'll just confirm for it to be shared. Just look at these, please, and just write on a paper and then type in the chat. This is the order they typically appear in. The question is, what is the order? Okay, it's saying the link for UbuntuNet website is not shared. I just posted them. I guess, okay, if somebody joined later, I'll repost them. So just let me just go through as others join. Maybe you're not seeing the earlier chats. So at some point in the middle, I'll repost all the links so that everybody has them. Okay. So I'll repost all links. Just take a few minutes and type in the chat what you think is the order that you write these sections. This is the order they appear once done, but it is not the order in which you write them when you're starting. What are your thoughts? Again, just use the main words. Don't worry about objective, specific aim, approach. Just focus on title, executive summary, overall goal, etc., all the way to budget. What do you think is the order in which you actually write them? Which is emphasizing is not the order in which they appear. And once you have your order, just sort of type it in the chat. We get a few and then we go through it. Once I get one or two suggestions, then we proceed from there. Okay, we've got a couple suggestions, so maybe I can just proceed. There's a question there. What about theory of change and monitoring matrix? Typically, things like theory of change are very specific, especially development agencies normally ask for this. It will come under that heading if asked for. If you want to include it and that heading is not there, it will come under significance and impact. Because the theory of change is trying to show the impact that whatever it is that you're doing would have and how that would be achieved. And those are the sections that it would come under. Monitoring and the monitoring matrix will normally come under monitoring and evaluation. Again, those are typical of development agency areas, but if not given, it will come under the work plan, is where you'll have the issue of monitoring, etc., because that's part of your work plan as well. But okay, we have those two suggestions. Let us look at this. If you look on the left, is the order they appear. If you look on the right, is the order you normally would write it. And I'll sort of, this is my take, and I'll sort of walk you through why this should be the order that you write. Remember, at this point, you have done everything we did yesterday. So you have fully designed your project. You're not starting from scratch. In other words, all the content you need for every section, you already have. You just have not written it down, right? So in terms of how everything flows, etc., all that is already done. We're now just focusing on the actual writing itself. And that's why this approach makes sense. The first thing is the overall goal, because that decides what you're doing. If you don't know the overall goal, it's very difficult to write anything else. My proposal is then you do the methodology, the bracket and rationale, significance and impact. You come to the work plan, the summary, if applicable. Not all proposals require a summary. Some do, many don't. The title, key personnel, and the budget. And I'll sort of walk you through why this is a proposed order, and I'll explain the rationale behind this. So let's start off with the overall goal. This states what you want to achieve by having this project funded and doing the actual work. Until you have a clear indication of what you want to achieve, then it's very difficult to imagine you can do anything else. So it has to be the first thing that you're working on, and write down concisely. Remember, right now we have bullets here and there in our various diagrams in the log frame. Now you have to just sit down and come up with the written portion of exactly what do you want to achieve, because once you do that, this will guide everything else, because everything else leads to achieving the overall goal. So until you have articulated it very clearly, it's very difficult, therefore, to work on the other areas. So that is why you would start off with the overall goal. The next is to work on the methodology itself. I have a goal. It has to be very clear in my mind. How will I achieve this goal? And the way the methodology is done, it's not simply I will do, I will do, I will do, I will do, the way you would have in an experiment, in a lab report, or etc. In a proposal is fundamentally different. It starts out with, for each area, what is the objective? And remember, we did the objectives tree. So we already have the overall goal from the green diagram, the objectives tree. It's taking that and writing out in full. All the objectives were in the objectives tree, to which you had an output. And these were all already in your log frame. So it is simply pulling out that objective. And in this training example, there were 3 of them. You started with the first one. You then decide in a full sentence what that objective is. That objective will have a desired output. That output is already in your log frame. And then the specific aim and the approach is what you have in your activities. So each activity has a specific aim. What does, in other words, now, what does each activity try to achieve? And then how will you carry out that individual activity? So you had mapped out all this yesterday, and that's why it makes the writing now much easier, because everything is mapped out. So just to repeat, the objective will come from the objective tree. That was the green diagram. Just now writing a proper sentence. Every specific aim is what you want to achieve from each activity that you wrote, and then you write the full approach below that. And again, we're going to go through this training example to say exactly how that fits in as well. So already in these 2 sections, this had all been built up in the work that you did on the green diagram that we looked at yesterday. Once those are done is when you now come to the background and rationale. Why do we put background and rationale? Many people start off here with background and rationale as they're writing. The challenge is, especially where you have page limits, but each section does not have a page limit, so it's free, so long as your total number of pages is limited. You can write a lot on background and rationale and run out of space, because background and rationale always has a lot of information to write. So you want to write the background and rationale after you've done your overall goal and after you've done your methodology. So you only pick the areas of the background and rationale which directly support your overall goal. Not the general background of the area, but you just pick the areas which directly support your overall goal as well as your methodology. Recall at this point, you have all the notes for these sections. You had reviewed all the literature. This all comes from the work you did with the initial red diagram, the impacts hierarchy diagram. You're just going through your notes, pulling out the relevant sections and putting them in the write-up for your background and rationale. There is a difference between those 2 words. Even if your heading just says background, right? But you need a rationale in it, in that write-up. The background simply places your work in context of what has been done and what is the current status. That is the background. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did this, it didn't work so well, etc., etc., etc. Therefore, this is where we are. That is the background. The rationale is then, out of all the problems that were there in our green diagram or the red one, why did you pick the ones you have decided to work on? What is the reasoning behind the choices you made and why you believe these ones that you have picked are going to have the biggest impacts on the problem you're trying to solve? So that is the rationale. There are 2 fundamentally different areas you're trying to address. First one is, what is the context? Where are we? The second one is, out of all the problems I could have picked, I picked these ones for these reasons. And you put that in the same section. And so both of them place the context of the problems and the impacts that you had found in the impacts hierarchy diagram. I hope you're seeing now that the earlier work we talked about yesterday was not busy work. You developed a lot of information in both those, developing those diagrams that now make the writing relatively easy, because you simply go back to that information you had found and continue your writing from where you had left off. So that's why we do background and rationale next. Once you have placed your work in context and identified the reason why you picked the areas you are, then now you want to make sure that you show why is this particular area significant? And if successful, what would be the impact? This is probably one of the sections most poorly written by people when they apply. Poorly written in the sense that it just gets a cursory response, not much detail, and people pretty much just focus on my methodology. They focus on my device that I'm going to develop, my software, my application, is where all the energy is spent without saying, okay, fine. Having done all that, and if everything works beautifully, who cares? And significance and impact answers this who cares question. That if I succeed, this is the significance of the area I'm working on, and this is the impact that it is going to have. Very clear, and it should be very clear in your mind too, that if the funder does not see the significance or impact of what you're proposing, they will not fund you no matter how beautifully you've written the technical part of your proposal. Because at the end of the day, they're not funding your application. That is not what somebody is funding. Somebody is funding what your application, if successful, can achieve. But the only way they're going to know what it can achieve if you say what it can achieve and the impact that it would have. This is a crucial section that should not be buried inside another. If headings are prescribed and it is not there, we'll show you how to put it in. If you're writing your own headings, where the headings are not prescribed, always put a heading, significance and impact, or equivalent wording. Why? Because in every grant review criteria, as a reviewer, there's always scores for significant and impact, always. So if you make it easier for a reviewer to find it because it has its own section, then they can review it and score it, as opposed to if it's buried, for example, in background rationale, you buried it somewhere. Now the reviewer has to search, okay, that's good background, good rationale. Where is the significance? And they're the ones searching for it. You end up with a position where you're hurting yourself when it comes to the actual scoring on this area of significant and impact. So where possible, you should give it its own heading so that it stands out on its own. Still on this issue of significance and impact, again, I'm giving the example of a CV here. When you write your CV, you highlight aspects of your career that strengthen your chances of getting a job. But your CV is not one paragraph after another, free-flowing. The CV has sections, so that if somebody wants to look for something specific, whether it's your academic qualifications, work experience, whatever it is, they can go directly to those areas or those sections without having to read through the whole document searching for this. And again, I'm emphasizing on this particular one, this is why it's important that significance and impact, where possible, gets its own heading. But where if headings are prescribed, then give it a subheading in one of the other sections that are prescribed, so that again, it's still easy to find, even though it's not part of a major heading, because as I've emphasized, it's always part of review criteria. Of course, at this point is now when you can do the executive summary. You cannot summarize what you have not written. So all the core elements are written. So now I can summarize where it's applicable. Not all proposals require a summary. The AI call for climate resilience does require a summary. And in that case, they actually tell you it's a public-facing summary. So you write it knowing that if funded, that's what will be posted for the public to see on the work that you are doing. It's important to note that an executive summary is a complete summary. It's not the introduction of the proposal. So you should talk about literally from beginning to end, something about the goal, hint on the methodology. In your case, will be a hint on the existing prototype or proof of concept that is there, some issues of background and rationale, and finally concluded with significance and impact. All that should be summarized in a paragraph or two. It's very similar approach when you're writing a journal paper where you have an abstract, where the abstract is not an introduction, but it's complete, including some indication of the results that were obtained. With the age of AI, people are using AI to create the executive summaries. One would argue, yes, maybe that's a good idea, but if you do, check it. AI doesn't know your thinking. It will give it the way it's thinking. It doesn't know what you want to emphasize. It will decide what it wants to emphasize. And so you may end up with a very bland executive summary because AI tries to balance between, especially if you tell it, or again, depending on the instructions you give it, between trying to be very boring on the one hand, very dry, but also because these are academic work, you also don't want to be on the other side where you sound like a marketing piece of marketing material. So it tries to give you a balance. So again, yes, you can use it. I've used it before, but I use it as a draft. I then take that draft and massage it to what I think is what I would like to say and how I would like to say it, without having to start to write the executive summary from scratch. But again, that just depends on how you approach your work. The only message I have there on the AI side is don't just use it and paste it without actually going through it to ensure it is conveying the message that you would like to convey for your summary. The title is next to last here. And I get bashed or pushed back a lot on this, so that I can write my title on day one. My view why it's very difficult to write your title on day one is at the very, very beginning is even as you are writing these sections, and we have agreed that you already have an outline, certain things may change as you now go into the details of writing. And you want your title to reflect the final version of your proposal, the final version of the project you're working on. As opposed to writing all these sections, things sort of change a little bit, then you have to go back and do that title again. Remember, the title is the first thing that a reviewer sees because they normally get a list of titles before they download and click each one to review it. And therefore, you want to give the best impression up front on what is it that I'm looking at as well. Reviewers are humans. They'll form an opinion from your proposal, whether you believe this is fair or unfair, simply by looking at the title, right? And therefore, you want it to capture and convey what you're trying to do. Everything in your proposal, from title all the way to the end, should be conveying one unified message all the way through. And that's why we are sort of hinting at these areas that you should work on. I've seen very long titles where you try to do too much. It should not be too long. And again, that is left intentionally vague. You make that call on what you consider to be too long. Many funding agencies, especially now that nearly all proposals are submitted online, if there's a portal for it, the title section will have a word count limit or a character limit. That's their way of saying this is anything beyond this is too long. As well. You also don't want it to be too short, where it's almost cryptic. All right. So remember, they'll see the title and go to the executive summary where you have a lot more detail. So composing a title is just playing around with words, getting a concise sentence that actually captures and conveys what you plan to do. It is the same title you will use if funded for messaging, if you're reaching out to stakeholders, etc., etc. They're the ones, normally you'll send them something with the same title. And that's why we spend so much time on this. Okay. I've just seen the comment there. Okay. And I guess we can all see the comments, so I don't have to read them. But yes, that is noted about the title. Now, your proposal is essentially done in terms of what you would like to do, how you would like to do it, why you want to do it, and if you're successful, the impact it would have. This is the core part of your proposal and what you are selling. The other parts is, are you able to do it? And please, you need to distinguish between the two. Everything we have done up to title simply says what you would like to do, why you want to do it, and the impact it would have. It has not discussed in any way that you have the capacity, capability, or ability to do it. None of that is mentioned yet. Work plan, key personnel, and budget is where these are determined. And these are evaluated equally to what you see above that we have covered. Because even if you have the most wonderful idea, but I believe as a review that you can't do it, or the work plan you have given shows that, yes, you say you can do it in 12 months, but this work, which is fantastic, actually requires 24 months to complete. So there's no way you'll finish in 12 months. I look at your key personnel, I say, yeah, there are some huge gaps now in terms of the skill set required, or your budget is completely out of whack with the activities. Those three areas can end up with a non-funding proposal, even if everything you have done so far is absolutely perfect. And therefore, that's why we put them at the end. Because you cannot come up with a work plan, decide on key personnel and a budget until you have fully articulated exactly what it is you're doing, which is what we have from overall goal down to title. We have now fully articulated what we want to do. We can now jump into the because this is the administrative side of a project. The technical side is the first, the black bullets we have done. So, oops, let me just go back to, sorry, let me just see here. Yes. I want to go back here. I thought I had a slide on this. I don't, but I just want to harp on this just a little bit more. Let's go to the work plan. The work plan, a lot of people just put a heading work plan and say, we will work according to the following schedule, and they put a Gantt chart, the end. That is not a work plan. Just to be clear, a Gantt chart is a summary. It's a graphic summary of your work plan. But a Gantt chart on its own is not a work plan. Not enough information in a Gantt chart. So you want to include a table, typically, clearly articulating the activities that will be done, what period they will take, etc., etc. I'm hesitating on the form because work plans and implementation tables come in so many different forms depending on how you work. So I don't want to prescribe this is what the table should look like. The book has an example of one, but again, I'm emphasizing it's just an example, depending on what you do. The key message is simply that your work plan must be detailed enough so that anybody looking at it believes that you clearly understand the amount of time and ordering that would be required to achieve the work that you yourself have proposed, right? And that's essentially will all fit within the work plan area, not just simply a Gantt chart and one image and a sentence above it. Key personnel. The call for proposals, this particular one that we're working on, AI for climate resistance, is very picky on personnel. And they clearly emphasize some of the roles that have to be there. Now, some of these roles can be done by the same person, but they're saying that for this kind of a project, these roles have to be there. So tell us who will do them. And you will list, this is somebody will do this, somebody will do that, and the call explains this in gory detail. This is not everybody working the proposal. This is the key people, and every key person essentially should be somebody who is necessary for a core aspect of the proposal. Key personnel do two things, and why you put it at the end. The way you come up with key personnel, of course, you're the ones writing, so you're key personnel, but the way you come up with it, even at this point, is to go through every single activity and you decide who will do this activity, who's in charge of this activity. It could be the same person in many places. So once you have assigned humans to every single activity, whether they're doing it in charge, overseeing, whatever title you want to give, you collate that. That is your list of key personnel. So you may end up in a way that because you're so involved in writing and you go to that exercise, you realize there's certain key areas that you don't have a human. So that guides you, okay, I have a gap here. I need to find someone who will fill this gap. And you look for that person and you add it as part of your key personnel. Or you may realize that once you're done, and there were people you were thinking about adding, but you don't see any role for them as key personnel. Therefore, it tells you then there's no need to add them because they really don't have any role in the project. So it ensures that you have a fit for purpose project. Every human has a significant task, and where you don't have one, you go look for that person. It is typically looked negatively if you do identify a gap, which is fantastic, and then you write the if funded, you will find someone to fill it. That is always a big negative. It's a red flag because the argument is, you can ask that question or make that statement in reverse. If funded, what if you don't find the person to fill the gap? What happens? So you never ever want a key personnel area to be a missing person. Now, the people you can normally put, I will bring on board, I will hire, are typically operational people who will do certain tasks, but they are being guided by somebody who's listed as key personnel. Though that is very common. So, for example, you're going to go out and do a survey, you're going to hire evaluators to go out and take the survey. You don't have to list the evaluators now or even know who they'll be, right? Because those will be guided by somebody who has developed the survey and everything that you're going to do. And you can simply list, we will hire so many enumerators who will go out and collect data and put that in your budget, right? So I hope you see the distinction between the key personnel and personnel in general. All key personnel should be in your proposal and not be something that comes much later. Finally, is budget. There's a question asked for the key personnel. Are there any degree requirements? This comes from the experience that many calls look for PhDs and postdocs. But since we are working from prototypes, is this call going to be heavy on looking for PhDs or just their backgrounds and how they will contribute? Here, if you have a PhD, it is fantastic. If you don't have a PhD, it is okay. We are simply looking for the activities you have done. Is the person qualified to do it? This particular grant, where you're going from a proof of concept to a working prototype, is not a research-intensive grant, because one would argue that the core research has already been done. That's why you have a proof of concept. You simply now want to move your proof of concept to a working prototype. That may not necessarily be PhD heavy. So no, it's not something that we'll be looking and saying if there are no PhDs or too few PhDs, that is an issue. It's simply, do you have the skill set to move your proof of concept to a working prototype? Okay, so I'll come to budget. Budget, as you see, it is last. It is at the end. Please don't start dividing 10,000, the very, very little $10,000 at the beginning, because you have no idea what you're going to do with it. At this point, of course, it's the back of your mind, so it's not an unlimited project, but it's not something you focus on. Now you can focus on the best way to do your budget, and the call also requires it, is you now go to each individual activity and you put a cost to it. So again, I'll go back to the one of surveying, right? I'm going to go survey a community, get some knowledge, indigenous knowledge, like in our example, come back, and I'm going to analyze it and put it into my early warning system. So this issue of going out to survey, you need transport to get there. You need allowances for the people who are there. You need to pay people who are actually gathering this information out there. You need to, maybe you are renting a place, people are coming in, so you have a venue, you need to pay for the venue. You need to pay the person overseeing this entire process as well. Maybe you've decided you're going to use a cloud service. You don't have to put things on paper and type them in later on. You can type directly into the cloud. The cloud service has a cost. That cost is put in there. so that by the end of it, I have all these different activities, all these different areas that this one activity will require, right? I go to the next one and the next one. So literally, I'm budgeting activity by activity. When I have budgeted every single activity, that is my total budget. Except now I have a chaotic budget, because budgets are not normally done by activity. They're normally done by the area of expenditure. But because I have it now, I can go there and say, okay, what are my personnel costs? And I go through all my activities. If I find Madara Ogot in 4 places, I take all those and I'll sum them, and that's what Madara Ogot's funding is required to have Madara Ogot on the project. Of course, a budget has budget notes. So I put Madara Ogot $100 in the budget notes. I'll explain where did this $100 come from. We talk about local transport, $200. I've gone to every single activity. I pulled out all the local transport items. I've totaled them, $200. But in the budget notes, I will write, how did I arrive at $200? And just go that way, one by one, and you've categorized everything. That is your budget. Now, unless you are the luckiest person on earth, which if you are, you should play the lottery in your countries today. Unless you're the luckiest person on earth, it is unlikely that once you do this exercise, your budget will equal exactly the total the funder is making available. Won't happen. You'll either be over or under. So now you make a decision. If you're under, unless you're significantly under, but if you're slightly under, leave it there. Don't do what some people do and put this line in a budget, which is always deleted in most cases, called miscellaneous. There's no such thing as miscellaneous in a funding budget. Miscellaneous means I don't really need it, but because the budget allows $10,000, mine has reached 9,500. I'll put 500 miscellaneous to reach 10,000. Typically, if you're awarding and now negotiating your budgets, which always happen, that will be deleted because there's no such thing as miscellaneous, right? It has to fit somewhere. The second one is that as opposed to putting miscellaneous, you now go back. You don't add activities, but you pad your budget. You add, okay, I still have $500. So let me increase this one by $50, this one by $100. You're trying to get to $10,000. Just like I said before, unless you're the luckiest person on earth, it is unlikely your budget will ever be exactly what is available. Funders know this, you know this. When they see a budget exactly $10,000, the first thing is, I want to see where the problem is. Remember, I've not even looked at your budget, but already in my mind, because the total is exactly $10,000, funding available was $10,000. I know your budget has a problem. So my goal now as a reviewer is to find this problem because there's no way they match exactly. If you're under, leave it. If you're way under, that's a problem. If you're way under at $5,000, it means that your project is not impactful enough. Because in this particular context, $10,000 is very little money. So if you're at 5, means your project is probably too small. Many grants actually give you a minimum and a maximum to tell you that if you're below the minimum, we're not interested, not impactful enough. Let's talk about if you are over budget, which is probably more likely than being under budget. What do you do? A couple of suggestions. One is you find areas that maybe you can trim down so that you can still achieve what you want to achieve, but it brings your budget down. Not ideal, but that's the budget that is available to you. The other one, which is less likely but does happen, is do you have other funding that you can leverage and you call it co-sharing? If you do, then you can, in other words, there's something else you are doing that is similar. Are there aspects of it you can incorporate into what was costing money in this particular project so that that particular activity serves both projects, but you're not asking for double money. So you simply state that those activities will be done by another project, and that will be counted as co-funding. Co-funding is always looked upon exceedingly favorably because it's showing that I'm not just looking for individual pockets of money. If I can leverage aspects of project that have some similarity in certain areas, then that will help. I'll give you a simple example. We have a project funded by the European Union as UbuntuNet, where we have been training about 20 librarians a year, every year, from all of our member countries. And it's about $96,000 over 5 years, something like that. And we are done year one, we're beginning year two. This is the beginning of 2026. Then we had another proposal that we were writing where we felt that this is not impactful and we wanted to train much deeper, much longer periods, more intensive, 480 librarians on setting up open institutional repositories, and we wanted to train them in their countries, in their language. In their language is UbuntuNet is primarily an English speaking, but our member countries speak Portuguese, our member countries speak French, so these trainings will now be in Portuguese, French, or English in country. Then we realized, we said, wait a minute, these are the same librarians. So why don't we take the funding from the one where we're training 20 per year, combine it with the one where we're targeting 540, which are in country. And when we ran the math, we realized we can train 560, an additional 80, which would be more than we're training 20 per year. So we simply went to the first funder, the EU, and said, we're writing this proposal. We want to, if funded, you're not funded yet. If funded, we want to leverage these funds in the other proposal. So combined, we're training longer and we're training much more than each one can individually do. EU said, go ahead. And we were funded on the other one. So now, but we put that as co-funding. So imagine you're applying for a grant and you're saying that in addition to the money I'm asking for, I am coming in with 96,000 euros. In addition to what I am asking you for, I am bringing in, and you show where it is coming from. So it's not a made-up story. Is that why we got funded? Unlikely. Did it contribute? Probably. Because now your budget is being looked at favorably. You're saying, yes, I want to do all these wonderful things. I don't have enough money, but I can leverage another project so that combined, we can now combine do this. So not everybody has that luxury. I get that. But I'm just saying, if you do and you're over, these are some options that you have available to you so that you can also make yourself look better. But in practicality, you do more with the resources that you have. And to pause there, if there are any questions on work plan, key personnel, and budget, because these are areas that people normally rush through and don't do as well as they do the others, which is the technical side. And I'm really, really, really emphasizing that the administrative elements are just equally as important as the technical side. If your technical is perfect, administrative is poor, you will not be funded, and vice versa. They both have to be well done in order to be funded. Some thoughts as you prepare to write. What if someone does not have co-funders? Yeah, that's what I was saying. That was just a special case we did. If you don't and you're over, then the only core thing you have to do now is reduce some activities. In all likelihood, it is unlikely that you can remove an activity to reduce your budget, because if you can remove it, means it was not important, because now, you're not going to have it. So normally what happens is you reduce the scale of the whole project, and so some of the activities are scaled down, not removed entirely, to bring your budget in line with the in this particular case, with the $10,000, but in general with any budget levels that are given. Central idea. A proposal, let us not lose sight that in a proposal, you are selling an idea which needs money. I mean the key personnel parts. Teresa, I'm not quite, just type, I'm not getting that question. You said you mean what if someone does not have co-founders yet? Oh, you mean, okay, you mean those you are working with. If I'm understanding your question correctly, yes, but in this context, especially for this grant, you must have them. And the reason why for this particular call, why you need more than one is because you're going from a proof of concept to a working prototype. There are people or skill sets or communities you need beyond a technical person, the person who developed the prototype. That is just one stakeholder who has the tool itself. The other major stakeholder is the community or organizations that you're targeting to actually use this proof of concept as a working prototype. So they have to be involved somehow, either in the proposal, or there has to be somebody who will liaison with this person. Then the other part is, because I can be the faculty who came up with this wonderful idea, I've run the proof of concept, runs like a charm, I've published my paper, I'm super excited, now I'm going to a working prototype. It doesn't mean that I am good at programming in the context of having an operational client-facing application. So it then begs the question is, who will program this into a client-facing application where the idea is already determined? It's not just coming up with the actual application itself. It could be the same person, it may not be, but that skill set also has to be there. And then final skill set, I'm going from memory, but they're all listed in the call, is a key component of this call is once it is running, you must evaluate how successful were you. So again, you ask yourself the question, do I have that skill set to be able to evaluate an application that is client-facing on its efficacy, but also on measuring how is this person better off before or after. So again, as a technical person who's the core person behind the application, you may not have that skill set to evaluate where there are people who come in and that is what they do, and they have that skill set. So you can see there are all these various roles that are required to be successful. Some can be done by the same person, but there are others where it's unlikely that the same person will be able to do this. And that's why it requires that you have more than one person as well. Okay. You are selling a central idea as well. I've seen a question there. I'm going to come to in a second. You're selling a central idea. This has to permeate throughout the proposal. And this is the goal. This is the what we're calling the goal or the purpose. It has to come out every single time so that the reviewer never loses sight of what you are trying to achieve. So once you've created your idea, you state it often. It's in the summary, it's in the specific aims, and you'll see this as we go through a concrete example. It's in the methodology, constantly reminding the reviewer what exactly it is that you're proposing to do. Make sure if you're citing literature, it is current. I cannot emphasize this enough. In all likelihood, your reviewer is aware of current literature. So you may have something that was correct, yes, but it's 2020. In our AI world, 2020 is like centuries ago, another lifetime. So you don't, and here with literature, you don't make an assertion of weaknesses of existing systems. If you're talking about systems that were there 5 years ago, 4 years ago, in 4 years, so much has changed. In your area especially, you cannot rely completely on journal literature, because you are looking now at applications, and most of application documentation, reviews, etc., in what we call the gray literature, not the academic journal literature, right? So that way is the only way you can place your application in context of applications that are running today and the weaknesses that they may have. And running does not mean running in the US or running in China or running in Japan. right? That is not your context. It means running in your country. In other words, if I have an application that's doing incredibly well in China, but does not exist, I'm a Kenyan, so I just say in Kenya. And you have come up with a proof of concept and you want to run on a working prototype that will do similar to what the other one is doing in China, but will do it in Kenya, the local context, right? That is fundable, right? Because yes, the other one is working, but it's working in China. You're in Kenya. And therefore yours is directly relevant. Now, if that one was simply a download, I can download it and run it in Kenya, then no, then now you have a problem, because why should I develop yours and I can simply download somebody else's and run with it, right? So those are some of the distinctions that you want to make to put your work in context. And you can only do that if you're current with what is out there at the moment. You yourself, I know it's double by saying you yourself, you have to be very, very confident and know the current state of knowledge. You have to be. If you're not, look it up. Make sure you do, so that you're placing your work in the current state of knowledge, and that you have to show that what you're proposing is building on the work or improving on others. You are not the first person to work in any area you want to propose. That nobody else has ever done anything in this area. I am the first person. The chances are next to zero that you are the only one who has worked in this. So it's important to say, yes, I'm doing A, B, C, D, but you must say, who else has worked in it? What did they do? What were their limitations? And based on that, I am improving on it to make it better with my application. Yesterday, we talked about the example of the early warning systems. What we were proposing were twofold. One, at the time in Kenya, that time, no early warning system had indigenous knowledge. We were adding indigenous knowledge. Second, none of them were using stochastic optimization methods. We were adding that into the systems. So we clearly state what others were doing. We clearly state their weaknesses and why. And then we're saying, therefore, to address those weaknesses, this is what our application will do by adding the indigenous knowledge and also by adding stochastic methods into it. So you're clearly showing how you're not building on, not ignoring, but improving on others' work. There's a question here: can potential partnerships be mentioned as a way to reduce the cost? Let's say we, the university, have to rent a server. Can we place our institutions like local NRENs? Absolutely, absolutely. And especially with your local NRENs, National Research Education Networks. Many of them will provide for you server space for projects at no cost if you're a member institution, or at very, very low cost because they're just there for short term to support a project and they provide it. Some of them, like Kenneth here in Kenya, I also know in South Africa, will also provide you with, or can provide you with, computing capabilities if required at some point in your project. And so, yes, I agree, fully reach out to your NRENs to be able to support you both now as you write the proposal. They say, yes, we can support you as a letter. And then, of course, if funded, you can actually now go out and work with them. Some thoughts as you prepare to write continued. Have a checklist. It's not part of the call. You will not submit your checklist. It's just make sure you don't forget something. Funding calls are very strict on requirements. This particular call has a long list of requirements as well. And when proposals come in, they go to a human filter. All this people or person does is check, have you done the minimum requirements? You know, things to be attached, formatting as required, page limits, blah, blah. They're just mechanically checking that have you met minimum requirements. And once you do it, you then move to evaluation stage. If you don't, your proposal dies there. It is never evaluated, simply because you may have forgotten to add something or you didn't follow all the instructions carefully. A checklist, and we look at an example, helps you do this. Because many proposals, funders will tell you how the proposal should be written, what it should contain, what additional documents must be attached. If you put all these requirements on a checklist and you update it regularly, everybody in the team has it because you'll be dividing the work to be able to do this. And it makes sure that you're all on the same page, nothing is forgotten, and you don't end up with your proposal simply being thrown out simply because you have not provided what is required as well. Okay. Here's a checklist for the proposal, our training example. It's a shortened version, of course, so it can be shown on the screen. I'll just blow it up just a little bit as we scroll down it. Very simple. You can make yours as detailed as you want, up to you, just as long as you have one. And here it was just broken down into mandatory documents. This call had required a duly filled application form. This is separate from the proposal. It wanted an integrity declaration form, certified copies of camp registration. It wanted an organization profile. These are mandatory. You don't have, you die. The proposal dies. And then every time our team met or meets, we'd update it. These were done. These are just initials of the person responsible. And then any comments as necessary are there. So you're always keeping track. This is purely administrative, not the actual writing. It's purely administrative, but it makes sure that you don't lose sight of what it's supposed to do. For the proposal, they're preliminaries. So we are saying, have we done our impacts, high dam objectives tree? Is our log frame ready? These are done. A first draft of the log frame is done. Then now it's the actual writing, of course. The main document, we've listed all the sections that were to be written. These are the people who are writing. Notice in our case, we were two of us, I'm MO here, who are writing all the technical parts. And then we had somebody completely different who was doing the administrative parts, the work plan and the budget separately. But then again, there's always, every time you meet, pending means you haven't started. Done, of course, is done. Started, it's ongoing. Again, you find the terminology that works for you. And by the way, updating this in a meeting takes all of a couple of minutes. You just simply go down each one. The person says where they are before you discuss the details. It's updated, done, and circulated with the end. The key appendices they wanted were CVs. Of course, everybody creates their own CV. And at this point, they're done. Everybody has submitted their CV in the format that was required. This is key. These formatting requirements. In this case, it was a maximum of 25 pages. There were no page section limits, just in total. The font was given, and the font face Times New Roman was given. Now, because we were writing it many people, and then collating, we had one person who was monitoring, just to make sure that we are not approaching this page limit and that everybody's using the same font, etc., etc. Their role was just to monitor, to keep the rest honest, even as they were being collated. Some funding guidelines were given, right? Just as in this call, you also have funding guidelines. They had said the range was between 200 to 400,000 Australian dollars. This is an indication of what I was mentioning earlier. They had put a lower limit that your budget cannot be less than 200,000 euros. That simply, Australian dollars. That simply means if your budget is smaller than this, your project is too small for us. Think bigger. And of course, 400 is the maximum that you can put as well. Project duration was 3 years. You write that down. Now here, they had said co-funding is recommended. We recommend co-funding, and you can include in-kind items as co-funding. My view is whenever a funder recommends means they require. Because think of it this way, I recommend co-funding. So it's not mandatory. It will not eliminate me, but I don't have it. It's a competition. And half the submissions have it. So all else being equal, we are technically good, our personnel are fantastic. They are more likely to pick somebody who is co-funded, which means it's a bigger project. And this case was in-kind was included. So you can say my time, the equipment I'm getting from someone, the server time for my NREN, that is all counted as co-funding. That person is more likely to be funded in this particular context than somebody who has no co-funding. Because here, the funder said co-funding is recommended. So for me, whenever I see the word recommended, I just translate that to mean required. And then they had said eligible costs, only direct costs, communication, blah, blah, blah. In your case, for example, the call is indicating that large equipment purchases are not recommended, right? So again, as you go through, just note this down. We cannot have a large equipment purchase, things like that, so that you don't put items in your budget knowing fully well that they'll be deleted anyway. And if it's essential to your project to succeed, then the project won't be funded. So just be very, very sure you read what has been written in terms of the funding requirements, and you put them in the checklist. I'm just reposting on the group for those who may have joined us later. The first link I've put is the Research Opportunities platform that we run at UbuntuNet, where there are many, many, many opportunities constantly being updated. So you can go there, sign up is free. And the second one is the where you can get the book that has all this content as well. It's again completely free. The online link, it will be on a browser. It's online, you can't download. But if you go on Play Store, you download the Tome app, search UbuntuNet Tome, you log in, you can download the PDFs and the other books in there as well. But this one is also there for you free to download. And the two sync between each other. Okay. The overall goal and methodology. What must you address as you write this? It has to be very, 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 very clear what the problem is. I sang that yesterday. I sang it earlier in the first hour. If I don't know what your goal is, and I don't know what the problem is, then all the other stuff written is irrelevant. Because everything is based on what is the problem and the goal that you're trying to achieve. That has to come out very clearly. And we mentioned the best way to bring it out clearly is the use of indicators and performance with some numbers where possible. In our area of AI climate resilience, there are always numbers. So this is one area where there are numbers. Then you're going to be talking about, by using AI, I can do this, I can improve efficacy, I can do efficiency, I can do all those. You can attach some level of numbers, whether qualitative or quantitative levels of evaluation. You should be able to apply those as well. Oh, thank you for posting the actual link also of the call itself. Why is your proposed work important? I'm at UbuntuNet, as you're aware, but I have one foot also in the University of Nairobi in Kenya. And for me, typically when we have a PhD or a master's defense, and I'll tell you the context of where that comes in, the core question, especially if it's one of my students, the core question I ask even before the defense, I ask the student to tell me in a short sentence, you have gone through all your presentation, you have said all these wonderful things you have done and all the results, etc., etc. Answer this question. Who cares? Why should I care about all this work you have done? If you cannot answer that question, then it simply means that you don't know the significance and importance of your work. The same applies to the proposal. Just imagine if you could sit in front of the reviewer and they tell you, okay, I don't want to read a proposal. Just tell me in a sentence or two why I should care about the work you're doing. And you should be able to articulate that, because that why I care is the significance and importance. Because you're telling a reviewer why, out of everybody who has applied, the funding is limited. Why should I fund you, not somebody else? You say you should fund me because A, B, C, D. That is the significance and the importance. The issue of how the work will be done. Don't waffle around and meander and leave things ambiguous. You have to be very clear on your methodology, so that I loved your methodology. I loved your goal. and why it is important, but now I want to be convinced as a reviewer, can you do it? And the way you convince me that you can do it is going through your methodology to see how you've written it. So make sure that you are clear on how to do this. If you're not clear on how you will get your proof of concept to a working prototype, then you're not ready yet to write a proposal, because it'll come out that it's not even clear to you that I can move my proof of concept to a working prototype and how I want to achieve that. The log frame helps you achieve this clarity to a large extent. But again, you must convince the funders that if the resources are given to you, you'll be able to complete the project because you know exactly how to do it. As we mentioned from the proposal, if you're going from the log frame, which we did yesterday, the goals help you write the impact. The purpose is the overall goal. That is the single one that you have. All the outputs is an objective or expected result, and all the major activities are specific aims. So on the right, we did all that yesterday, which helps you write on the left, which is the actual proposal. So that's how they are related. So here's the training examples, a bit small, but let me just go on the I'll blow it up a bit. Oops. And go on the left first before I worry about the right. So the specific aim, the overall goals, not a specific aim, is statement of long-term goals. You discuss the significance of the central idea of the project, but you do not write your central idea over several pages. The overall goal is short, right? So you want to be concise so that the viewer knows exactly what it is you are trying to achieve. This is the overall goal, again, just given as an example for the training example you're working on. One paragraph. But remember, you'll keep repeating these issues in every section. So here we're saying the research team seeks to reduce the vulnerability of 2 communities. So it's no longer just communities in semi-arid, arid and semi-arid areas, which was what we had in the green diagram. We're now specific. We'll focus on 2 communities in the semi-arid areas of Nyanza and Eastern Province in Kenya. And then we move on to what we pulled out of the green box directly by enhancing their adaptation capabilities and capacities to the effects of climate change, thereby improving their livelihoods. That came directly from the purpose in the green diagram. Then the project will also develop, deploy, and make available a hybrid knowledge base of indigenous modern approaches, adoptable and adaptable by other vulnerable communities. This is what you want to achieve as your overall goal. Your overall goal are not the impacts, right? Overall goal is what you will achieve when your project ends. You will have achieved this. The impacts will come later. Loss of, enhancing livelihoods, blah, blah, blah. Those will come later when we're talking about the impacts. The central idea is what is highlighted in yellow, right? And that came from the purpose in the green diagram. The research team seeks to reduce the vulnerability of 2 communities in the semi-arid areas of Nyanza and Eastern Province. Full stop. That is the central idea. So it's this idea that needs to permeate throughout your proposal. Every area you discuss, this central idea needs to come out, constantly reminding the reviewer. So in your case of climate resilience, and you're doing a working prototype, which is targeting a small community or a small organization, because it's a prototype, that is what will appear in this overall goal. It will be who are they and what are you trying to achieve with them. In this case, the who is Nyanza and Eastern Province communities, and what you're trying to achieve is reduce their vulnerability, clearly stated as well. You always throw in a hint of significance. So even though I'm focusing on overall goal, I've thrown in some significance early on to the reviewer that by enhancing the adaptation capabilities and capacities to the effects of climate change, you will improve their livelihoods. And then you're saying that also when I'm done, I will not keep this information to myself. I will now make available a hybrid knowledge base of blah, 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 by other for adaptable by used by other vulnerable communities. Sometimes a lot of us, we talk about this impacts dissemination. We say we'll publish a paper, we'll present at a conference. That is okay for purely academic work. This call is deployment into a working prototype. So the impacts are not simply then I'll publish a paper on how well the prototype worked. Not good enough. If the working prototype works, which it should work, then what? What next? That will be the impact. Where do you see it going after the working prototype? Those are the impacts we're discussing, right? So here we're talking about that after it is working, this knowledge we have gathered, which is working, we'll make it available to others so they can also use it. Since in our case, it was only restricted to 2 communities, right? Again, thinking big. Project is small, 2 communities, but when we're done, available to other communities. So you're thinking bigger. So we go to the methodology. Again, we're looking now at examples. We had said that each of the outputs can form an objective within your log frame. So here you can see we had a output, which was inventory of indigenous knowledge. That was just the output. I can now convert that into an objective. So my first objective for this is what you write in the proposal, is to develop and include in an early warning system an inventory of indigenous knowledge on climate change and mitigation. That is the objective that you would write in your proposal, derived directly from the log frame that you had worked on earlier. Now, under each objective, you develop specific aims. And again, specific aims is one terminology. Other people don't like it and they say, no, I prefer to say a work package. Especially in the development work, they have work packages. That is fine. So you just use whatever phrase works for you. Just so long as you know that you're saying that under each of the objectives, there's certain things you want to achieve, and this is how you will achieve them under it. So this specific aim, work package, or another phrase, that is completely up to you. Whatever you list must be achievable. And that may sound obvious, but some people write things and you look at it, you say, nah, I don't think they can do that. So it must be achievable. You must convince the reviewer, because we're now on the methodology, that this is achievable. You're not guaranteeing it will work. And we need to distinguish the difference. I can achieve something, but it doesn't work. So everything runs the way I thought it would run, but it does not achieve the objective I had intended the way I thought it would. This is why we are scientists. Not everything you produce works exactly as planned, but you should be able to achieve it and then determine the extent to which it is working. And then it should directly support the objective under which it is. These are very precise. They are not ambiguous because you're trying to convince the viewer that they're achievable and they're realistic. So don't specify aims that sound very, very good and exciting, but somebody reading at it will say, no, that cannot be achieved. This one sentence has 4 logical components that form a single paragraph, more than one sentence. Let me just take a pause for a second. The reason why I'm walking you through this process, and you'll see that every section has structure, is because you have page limits. So you want to make sure that every word, every paragraph, every section counts. And therefore, if you structure it well and make everything count, you can convey your full message, nothing left out, even though you have word limits or page limits. So your specific aim should have a title, a rationale, an indication of the approach, and a statement of why this particular aim is significant. This is all in one very short paragraph, under which the details will fall. So for example, remember we had just done the title, the objective already, of indigenous knowledge. I've then picked one activity to develop a synthesized indigenous knowledge base for 2 communities and an early warning system and coping mechanisms. So that will be one activity directly from the log frame. So the title part of the specific aim, remember we're writing one paragraph. Just the title component will be develop an indigenous knowledge base for 2 Kenyan communities on potential early warning systems and coping mechanisms for climate change. Comes directly from what you had written already. Just the English has changed, right? So all that work you did earlier, paying dividends now. And that's why I said once your log frames are done, which means you've had a red diagram, a green diagram, a log frame, the writing is not difficult because the core thinking has already been done. But then here's the full specific aim. So the first part is the title we have just looked at, right? The second part, we're not talking about few decision support systems. Sorry, that was the first part, is the title. The second part is now looking at the rationale of it. And we're saying that few decision support system tools incorporate early warning systems for timely evidence-based interventions. Further, none incorporate traditional early warning knowledge, which remains largely undocumented among community elders and is gradually disappearing. In other words, the elders are dying. So this is the reason why we have picked this one. Because if you go all the way to the bottom, that knowledge in elders' heads is being lost because they are dying. So we want to capture it before they are gone. So that's the rationale of doing this. The approach, you're hinting, the details will follow, but you're hinting so that you're giving the reviewer a roadmap of where you're heading. We propose using a mix of techniques, including interactive interviews, focus group discussions, guided seminars, structured interviews, along with documentation and the history of past reports on indigenous knowledge. I'm pausing because I want you to look at that last sentence and the history of past reports on indigenous knowledge. You are emphasizing that you are building on the work of others. You are not the first person. So a lot of people, when they go out to collect data, they only talk about the data they collect, forgetting that in this area, others have collected data and have reported on it. And so you want to show that whatever you will do will use the data you have collected plus whatever somebody else has collected that is relevant that I can build upon. And you emphasize that upfront. So that is the approach. And then the significance is the project will initiate a long-term commitment to the documentation, blah, 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 blah. And you're stating there why it is important. And the last part of the sentence, you're also saying that with a view that you'll also make as well being made available to other researchers. So you're saying, yes, I will use it for this tool, but I will also make what we have picked up available to others. Again, increasing its importance. This is one paragraph that opens up what we call the specific aim or the work package, below which you will now write the details, which we are not included here, but in the text, you can go down and you'll see all the gory details of the approach. But again, it should provide a broad outline of what you plan to do, how you plan to do it. A lot of people do the how. It's what and how. What and how. The two match each other so that somebody says, okay, this is what I'm doing, how I'll do it. What I'm doing, how I'll do it, as you write down your approach. Be realistic. Don't put too much that cannot be done in the timeline that's given. Remember that even if it's not picked up by the reviewer and you're funded, if you put too much, it means on day one you're behind because there's too much work to be done. So be realistic, in what you do. Also, don't propose tasks that neither you or your team have expertise. We talked about that earlier, making sure that you only pick tasks where you and your team have the expertise to do. In terms of the core tasks, of course, the other ones you can hire people to do, as we have already mentioned. The reviewer is an expert and has a good understanding of common methods. So don't spend so much time like you would in an academic thesis defining methods that are known. I'm conducting a survey and I'll use a stratified random sample. The end. Don't explain to me what a stratified random sample is. I know. At this level, it is known. The only time you explain something is if it's a methodology you have created that is unlikely to be known, then of course you have to explain it. But if you're using any standard method, don't explain it. The reviewer knows, just state it and run with it as well. You have to be confident when you write that you'll be funded. You know, when somebody is presenting, you can tell when they are not confident. When they're speaking to you, you always say, oh, that person was not very confident. People don't realize that writing is exactly the same. You can read a document and feel lack of confidence in the writing. Because remember, writing and speaking is the same head that is speaking and writing. So if you're not confident that you'll be funded, it will come out in your writing. So you need to be, and it's not false confidence. It's confidence, because if you're not sure, then don't bother writing, because there's no way you'll convince somebody else if you're not sure yourself. So step one is you must be confident in what you're proposing, then write with confidence as well. Again, the training example has the long text, too long to put in here. So just take a look as well. But I just wanted to highlight what confidence means so that we are together. In the approach for the training examples, we put somewhere, as noted by Mutua. Mutua is one of the authors, early warning systems based on incomplete probabilistic information, which means judgment and community involvement is extremely important to enhance ownership and trust of the early warning system. Right? So that is a documented issue. Then we come and say with confidence that the proposed tool will therefore also incorporate appropriate intervention factoring local conditions and input from the target communities. So step one, we're showing that we have a good understanding of what the current challenges are. Then the second part, we're saying our proposal directly addresses these challenges that are documented. So it's not I believe, I think, I feel. I am citing a document showing that this is the problem. Of course, you don't have to cite. You don't have to quote. You can just cite. In this case, it was short enough so that it could be cited. So the second part, as I've just said, therefore, you're showing how you'll address this shortcoming, and you're answering the why question. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because a challenge had been identified. You're working, again, I keep harping on this in climate science, you're addressing a challenge. You must document that this challenge really exists, as we have cited here. So the reviewer is comfortable. Say, okay, because the reviewer will not know every local condition in every country, but they will trust your references if it's a trustable source and say, okay, so it does exist. And then you're showing how you address it as well. It also continues. Remember this was the starting again. That was the problem. This is the why I'm addressing the problem. And the second part of the same paragraph is showing how I'm addressing this problem. So we're saying the scene support tool will be built on stochastic methods to determine the most likely forecast based on a wide array of available probabilistic information from indigenous knowledge, modern science indicators to maximize the likelihood of accurate, reliable forecasts by finding the broadest set of indicators pointing to a similar forecast. Very clearly stating how, with confidence, you're going to do this. By the way, it just looks like a lot, but in a document, that's a very short paragraph. All that we have covered in those three sections, just that here it's blown up. But it has stated what the problem is, it has stated why you want to address it, and now it has stated how you're going to address it. All in the same paragraph that you are looking at. And of course, it continues beyond that. You are this is the same paragraph, right? You're reminding the reviewer that you know what you're doing. And so you conclude this same single paragraph, the process will be anchored on either simulated annealing or genetic algorithms, as opposed to just leaving it as stochastic optimization techniques. And you're telling the reviewer which the research team has vast experience. It's not arrogance, it's confidence. And the reviewer needs to be confident you can do it. So later on, when the reviewer goes to your key personnel, you'd have listed so-and-so, Madara Ogot can do A, B, C, D. Then when they look at Madara Ogot's CV, they'll see all this work on stochastic methods and say, okay, yeah, I'm confident that this person can do this work. But it started by putting the hint in the approach, in the actual write-up. You're saying, yes, we're doing all these things and we have vast experience, not experience, vast experience. Adjectives are also important. So I'm just giving examples of when we say build confidence, this is the way you're doing it. And it's not arrogance. It's simply stating, yes, we will do this and we know how to do it. And you write that into your proposal. Let's talk about preliminary results. In your case, you're lucky, so I'm going to go to this faster because you do have preliminary results. That is your proof of concept. Many times you don't, and you say you need funding to get the results, but without the results, sorry, take it backwards. To get the results, I need funding, but I don't have funding, so I cannot get the results. I want to emphasize the call has a specific section with a heading that asks you to explain your proof of concept before you can say how you want to advance it to a working prototype. There's a whole section on proof of concept. This is what we call a preliminary result, that I need this to do the working prototype. So when you will explain your proof of concept, make sure that you explain it that I believe as a reviewer that it actually works. Hence, proof of concept. So what evidence are you providing? What indicators and performance levels are you providing to show that it actually works? The concept works. And that in total is where you'd have it under preliminary results. In this case, this is normally generic, but in your case, a specific section is put for you to explain this. That's why these are there. I'm just going to go through this quickly. I mean, just scan through them. I want to go through them directly only because you already have a preliminary result. But again, for other projects, you'll find it in the text to read about it. But I want to harp on these expected results. If all goes well for each objective, remember I've picked one objective. I'm working on the specific aim of that one objective, right? Which is the activities. And you must then state that what for each activity, if all goes well, what is the output? Which is the expected result. And the log frame already helped you, guided you what these expected results are. All these must be addressed in the write-up. So you want to lay out the context. We have done that. You want to critically evaluate. Sorry. Oh, I jumped a section. Sorry, my apologies. I'm ahead of myself. So in the expected result, you need to state that if all goes, you don't write if all goes well, but the expected result that if all goes well in a sentence or two, this is what this particular specific aim, which is an activity, will result in. Because as a reviewer and as yourself, you want to make sure that all these expected results allow you to achieve the objective. If they don't, then you need to fine-tune them, right? Because you had an objective, add activities or specific aims under that, or work packages. Understand that if I carry out all my specific aims or all my work packages, then all their related expected results will help me achieve my objective. So it's a logical check to make sure that that is done as you write up. Background and rationale. Now that I know why I'm doing it, what I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, now I can put it in context because I pick now only the areas that support the approach I've taken and the goal I'm trying to achieve. If the areas in background and rationale that do not directly support, they support related but not directly, I leave them out. Only pick what directly supports what I am proposing. I have put the word concise as the first word because this is one section you can really go overboard because you'll always have a lot of information on background and rationale. So critically evaluate them, synthesize what has been done, justify it, and place your work in context. Clearly identify the areas that need investigation. These are the problems that still exist. And then you're showing how your work fills this gap, right? You're addressing an issue that already exists. And the text gives an example. There are two ways to do this. The first one is what's called a checklist approach. It's functional, but I call it the lazy approach. which means I simply list so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that, this was the gap, so-and-so did this was the gap, so-and-so did that. It's just a list, all right? And again, you can use it. It's the easy of the two. Make sure the references are current. I don't use it. I don't recommend it as the write-up approach. I recommend the other one, what's called the funnel approach, where you take all previous work that is relevant, you analyze it, you synthesize it. I've seen the question on the working prototype. I'll come to that a little later on. You analyze it, you synthesize it, and then you write the section. Let it go through your head and then write. So you're not just saying so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that, etc. You form a coherent set of paragraphs making and building a case for the work that you are doing. It is more difficult and time-consuming, yes, but the write-up is more concise, easier to follow by the reviewer, and just reads better than simply listing one thing after the other. And again, the text has a couple of detailed examples that you can go through. Either one is your choice you make. You already have all the information. You did this when you prepared the impacts hierarchy diagram and the objectives tree. You had all this already. You're simply pulling from them what is relevant and writing it in. So you're not going back to the literature. The only time one would argue you go back to the literature is if you find a gap. You're going through all this, right? You realize, there's something missing. And you go back and plug that gap in as well. I have just shown one example. Don't worry about the diagram on the left. It's too small. You can't read. The point is just to show that it is pulled from, right? So the first sentence says climate-induced droughts comes directly from a box on the left. Coupled with the adaptation, capabilities, and capacities comes from my core problem, have resulted in significant loss of human life. That's the very top box in the red diagram, occasioned by the dissemination of crops and animals. So my introduction, the first sentence in background and rationale, has pulled elements directly from the red diagram. Of course, later on, I'll expand on these areas. I'm just opening up. So in the first sentence, I have given the reviewer, with no evidence yet, but just a sort of a guide of where we are heading, the importance of what we're doing. The induced droughts coupled with low capabilities have resulted in significant loss of human life because of decimation of their crops and animals. The context is clear in one sentence, which I'll expand on. But that is not good enough. Most people would end there, but we're saying no. Give numbers so that when I talk about loss of decimation of crops and animals, to what extent? So you said in this instance, we said, for example, there was a severe drought in 99 to 2000 in Lake Turkana area. There was heavy loss of livestock, blah, blah, blah. There's a reference. And then you go specifically in 2008, 2009, Kenya's drought was extreme. And you get that approximately in 57% of cattle and 67% of sheep dying in Samburu Central District, which is one of these ASAL areas. So now a reviewer, when they say dissemination of crops, has numbers. They know the extent by 57 and 65% that you provide. It also makes your phrasing believable so that somebody doesn't believe you're just putting emotional adjectives, dissemination, significant loss of human life to tag on the emotion. Excellent idea, but you must support them. And again, in this opening paragraph, they're supported. In this case, it is quantitative information that is provided. Again, the full write-up is in the book itself. Now, another area that is picked on as an example, so many sentences down, it's saying several regions, initiatives aim to build capacity for seasonal climate forecasting. For example, Greater Horn of Africa, blah, blah, blah. Directly pulled out of the red diagram. In this case, the absence of indigenous knowledge is the green one. Incorporation of local indigenous knowledge provides the desired local specificity. Then you're saying few efforts incorporate early warning systems into broad decisions. That comes from the box that says lack of a comprehensive decision support tool. And then you're saying further, there's a lack of documentation, blah, blah, blah. That comes in the box of limited documentation. Again, I'm simply emphasizing, you can read it clearer in the text, that initial red diagram helps you write this section. Now it's in an orderly fashion because you have included all the cause and effects. So I can put my right arm in what causes what because I already described that when I was coming up in the red diagram. In the green, I can pull out some rationale issues. We're saying this project will initiate a long-term commitment to documentation of indigenous knowledge. That comes from the box that says extensive documentation as one of the objectives. You're saying this knowledge will build upon existing knowledge and address previously enumerated shortcomings. That comes from the box, by directly incorporating local community input into the project design. That comes from the box, participatory approaches to community involvement on the bottom right. And then there's a tool there that the tool will be supported by hybrid early warning systems and an inventory of corresponding adaptation strategies. That comes from the inclusion of indigenous knowledge, etc. Okay, I think you get the point of writing coming from the work you did already. But now it is relatively simple because the boxes have already been determined, are not coming directly out of your head. Significance. I've harped on this. Why should you care? Why should anybody care? What is the novelty? What is innovative? That is 1, 2, and 3. Why do I care? What is the novelty? What is innovative? You are competing with others who are also writing good proposals, right? So it's not that mine is good, others are bad. Those who survive are all good. It's just a question of why is yours better, right? They're all good. Why is yours better? And a big chunk of that will come from the significance. Here's where we started talking about significance under background and rationale, because there was no significance heading. So this is what we're saying, you can always squeeze significance. If there's no significance heading, squeeze it at the end of background and rationale. We've talked about the background, which is where you are, the rationale, why you're doing it. Squeeze significance and impact at the end of that same section. And here we are saying that the two significant outcomes are the presented approach represents a departure from traditional approaches. You're saying we're doing different than what others have done. And you're saying what others have been doing. Others have tended to be single project-based, non-participatory with development teams informing target communities. So I don't just say I'm different, I'm saying how I'm different. What were they doing? The second part, again, showing what others have done. I'm saying, unlike similar efforts that have been one-off projects. So you're putting a significance in context of what others have done. And then you state what I am doing, or your project is doing, is by drawing on local expertise and know-how developed over generations, coupled with modern science to provide holistic, affordable, documented adaptation strategies. And in the second part, you're saying the proposed work will develop a tool that incorporates mechanism for continuously updating the strategies based on indigenous knowledge from other communities and modern science. The tool will be made publicly available online for further development. So you've talked about at the beginning of 1 and 2, my two outcomes, what others are doing and why yours is different and why it is significant in both of them. All this information pulled out of the red and green diagrams. You then come to impact. And again, I'm mindful of time. Is what will be the context of your work output? What impact will it have in your area of work? What will it contribute to knowledge, learning, society at large? These are all possible impact areas. In our careers, our work area in this case is climate resilience. A funding agency wants their money to have the greatest impact, so they can tell the best stories that we funded these projects and this is what these projects achieved. So they'll pick the ones, all else being equal, you have a great project, key, excellent personnel, budget is fine, impact. I'll pick the one that has the biggest impact. Another word that we will say is more money for your buck. For the little money I've given you, if I can get the biggest impact, that is the one I'm going for. So you must clearly demonstrate what is your contribution to knowledge, to society, etc. Depends on the impact, and why the funding agency should give money to you and not someone else. At this level, they are not judging whether your proposal is good or not good. It is good, or you'll have been eliminated in the earlier steps. You are good. What they are judging is, because my money is limited and I have many good proposals, why should I give it to you and not somebody else? And impact is one of the key areas that a reviewer will look at. If you feel that your work is not significant and does not have impact, the reviewer won't either. Don't bother writing. You be your judge first. You don't waste time. If you feel, okay, if everything works, the impact isn't big, the reviewer will feel exactly the same, if not worse, because they don't know it as closely as you do. So be your own judge on this. I'll just give an example here. We said the use of the developed tool by the two communities will ensure the development of evidence-based mechanisms. The pilot projects are expected to provide tangible benefits to the communities, including a significant reduction in loss of life and improved food security. Remember, these are just the introduction of the impacts, and then the full write-up, you provide numbers, your guesstimated numbers, because now you're looking ahead. So everything is an estimate in terms of numbers. And then you're saying that the project will inform government policy, both nationally, regionally, particularly on environment, blah, 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 etc. So again, these are being pulled out of the green diagram. These are the headings or the introductions, and then the details of how these impacts will be achieved, shown in your write-up as well. I talked about the title before, so I think some of the points had covered. Let me just skip through those. The issue of having your title concise, etc. I had covered those. Key personnel, you are evaluated as much as everything else we have discussed so far. The reviewer must have confidence that if funded, the people listed can actually do the work. And sadly, the only way I can judge you on can you do the work is on past work, not future intent. And that is where your CV comes in. If you have a standard CV, throw it away. It is useless for grant proposal writing. That CV that you constantly update, its only value is a record to allow you to write tailored CVs. In this case, though, a CV structure is requested. So you must follow it, and it is short. I'm going from memory. I think your CVs are either 2 or 3 pages maximum, and it gives you particular headings. And the idea is simply that it wants you to talk about items directly relevant to the proposal, not your life in general. Just whatever is directly to the proposal is what you want to put. But in the key personnel section, you put a paragraph for the person to read. That's also required in this proposal. And it outlines the relevant capabilities and the roles that they will play in the project, in addition to the CV itself. You must clearly show that the team is qualified. I cannot emphasize that enough as well. They will look at your paragraph, but they will also go through the CVs as well to make sure that the team can actually deliver on all the areas that you have shown. If a team member does not have a role, don't put them in, because that is what will come up as a question. That you have Madara Ogot in your team, but when we look through the work to be done and his role, we cannot find any role for this person, which means you've simply put them there to add to the budget, or the person is being paid to do no work at all. The reverse is also true, that if you've identified a gap for key personnel, make sure you fill it before you submit your proposal. Other personnel can be hired after the proposal. You must tailor your CV to the proposal. In your case, it is mandatory and is prescribed, but even if you're writing for others, tailor your CV. The one that you normally fill out, take it and just pull out the elements that are required. Avoid that temptation for a generic CV for all calls. And the key thing is you see what is required to deliver, and that is why you pick on the areas that allow you. And so you'll have headings. Oops, sorry. 1 second. Sorry for that. You will have headings like, for example, if you're citing papers you have done, you will not list publications as a heading because you can have very many, and some may not be directly relevant to this project. So you'll put selected publications, and then you only include publications directly relevant to the project. Because remember, you're building a case. So if you put a publication 2, 3, 4, 5 irrelevant, I'm not building my case. All I'm doing is I'm forcing the reviewer to ship through items that have no bearing on the project, right? And this goes to all the areas. You just put selected this, selected that. If you've had previous funding and previous projects related, you put selected previous projects or whatever the heading you'd like, or selected grants, so that you're only picking grants directly related to the project, because that's the case that you are building, that I am qualified to do this work as well. And a template is given that you can follow. Again, let me just skip these slides because in the actual call, all this information is given on the template that is required. So I'll just use the time we have left. Education is only put last because the assumption is you're educated, right? So I know in most CVs we put our education first. And that's okay if you're going for promotion, whatever. But for projects, even if you look at the World Bank CV templates, etc., they're normally last. The assumption is you are educated. I just want to know, what can you do first and what experience do you have? The education is a checkbox. Yes, they have a degree, check. It's not an evaluation tool. The others is what you're evaluated on. And that's why normally you find education last, just list them and you're done. And again, just focus on items that matter. As I almost conclude, here's an issue on the budget. And we're talking about budget last. Over the years, this is a Kellogg Foundation, is big foundation. It's an old quote, but it's still relevant. Over the years, I've learned that the narrative can be enriching. That is what you write. But the numbers are stark and straightforward. I want to see the money is doing the job described in the proposal. So they will love your writing. They look at the numbers, but they want to see that this money you're asking for, does it do the job? So please spend enough time on the budget, sort of the way I've indicated, that every number in your budget actually does something. We discussed this earlier on funding guidelines. They just put here for completeness, but you have them in the text as well. I would encourage you that go through the funding guidelines, highlight them, extract out what we have provided as funding guidelines, and put them into the checklist. That way you don't have to keep referring to the 10-page call every time. Just take out what is important in the checklist. That way you will make sure that you don't forget any item as well as part of your funding guidelines, or don't violate any of your funding guidelines. It is key to identify everything that is reasonable and necessary to deliver the project. And the budget requires you to break them down into personnel, money you're paying humans, and a separate section on anything else which are non-personnel costs. And the template gives you a structured way to do this. I'll talk about one item. I don't know if it's next there or not. We have talked about overestimate. Here it is, overhead costs. This project does not allow indirect cost. Many institutions have a policy on indirect cost, 10%, 15%, etc. And normally your overhead cost will be whatever the institution says it is. And you must have the policy evidence to say, okay, this is 10%, here's the evidence. But this particular project does not allow overheads. It's so small, all the money goes straight to you, the person who's doing the work. And most institutions will allow this so long as you show that there's evidence that overhead is not allowed, and simply give them the call, because the call is very clear that overhead costs are not allowed. It's not UbuntuNet saying there's no overhead costs allowed. For this particular grant, the EU has said no overhead costs. And of course, most of our institutions have received EU funding and are very aware of this. Normally, they restrict it to a very small number as the EU, or say no overhead. In our case, because the amounts are small, they have said no overhead costs. I talked about miscellaneous is something that is highly, highly, highly discouraged. Don't put it. In our case, as UbuntuNet, if you put it, we'll just delete it. And if you're being funded, lower your budget by whatever you have put as miscellaneous or other. Spend time on justifying your budget. Nobody wants to not fund you or disagree with the numbers, but you're all different. Nobody will be in your head knowing where these numbers come from in the budget summary. So you must have a write-up explaining where each number came from. And these are normally very short. They can only be longer if there's something unusual, unexpected, but crucial. Then you give a long explanation. They can be as long as you want, so long as you get your message across. Remember, nobody's calling you to ask you to explain your budget. So if they have doubts, your project can simply die because you didn't explain enough something that, one, on the surface may look suspicious or in the wrong place, but is perfectly acceptable, just that you did not explain it to the extent that is required. And the Texas has a very simple budget example. And again, you can do similar. It just gave personnel costs, number of days, the unit cost per day, total. So you don't just put a total. It's just good to know if I have 600,000, where did it come from? If I have 300,000, where did it come from as well? So it's the rate you're paying a person and the number of days. Then the non-personnel costs have their own headings. In this particular case, or this simple example, we've just taken fieldwork costs. And then again, they have, you have 30 days of subsistence at 9,000 per day. There's a total. Some like this are kind of general. You can put a lump sum. Local transport, in this case, was 15 days, 8,000 a day. You get the idea. It's enough for somebody to look at and go, okay, that makes sense. In this case, overhead was allowed, and that's the total that you have. Very brief notes. 1 to 4 are all humans, and we're simply saying the key team members, and then Prof. Ogot and Dr. Khan will spend of the 20 days in the field, carrying out the survey and engaging stakeholders, just sort of justifying why the number's big. You'll be out in the field for those days. And then you're also saying they'll spend a combined 30 days in Lodwar activities. In the above, again, you're justifying who are these people in Lodwar. Then you're saying while in Lodwar, they'll rent a vehicle, blah, blah, blah. You're explaining where this cost for local transport comes from. Again, very brief explanations, but then makes the numbers plausible as you go through as well. Okay. And to stop there, because most of these are written. I know I have a lot of other comments because there's a question that I want to address before we end in a couple of minutes, and any other questions on the actual call itself. And that is, somebody is asking, Mary is asking, kindly clarify what an existing working prototype entails. Maybe I can take a step back. At this point, you are expected to have a proof of concept, not a working prototype. A proof of concept simply means that I am developing this software application. It's based on this AI in laboratory tests. In my own testing with my own team within our lab, we have shown that this application can achieve what it's supposed to achieve, but it has not been packaged into any user-facing application or used by real users. So at this point, you're expected simply to have a lab working prototype so that your focus is not developing the core concepts or the core algorithms that you need for your proof of concept to work. The concept works. What you now want to do, what you're referring to as the working prototype, is move from and what this project is funding is to move you from this lab proof of concept into a working application with a working prototype. And is this application you would test with an actual organization or community who will come in as users and give you feedback on it worked well or it didn't work well, etc. So these are real life users. So one can argue like a small pilot that you'll run. And of course, because you have real life users as a pilot, whatever you're running is what we're referring to as the working prototype. It's still a prototype because the users will give you feedback which with other funding will allow you now to make it into an application that can be used by others generally, whether it's commercial or not. It can now be used otherwise. So we're simply moving you one step from the laboratory where you show that, yes, this works, excellent, to now an application that real users can test and work on with real life situations. That's where this project ends, but you can then use that to move it forward to now a production application that the general public or whoever your target audience is can use. Does it mean the proof of concept has been tested by real life users? The proof of concept does not have to have been tested by real live users, but in a lab setting, you must have shown it works. The working prototype is what will test it with real live users. Now, so that's the minimum. You should have tested it within the lab that the concept works, right? Even though real live users may not have tested it. That's what you'll do with this grant. Now, if you've already tested with real live users, the grant is simply expanding where you left off to the next step. So if I had a very small group, I can go to a larger group. If the issues that the smaller group raised and I've incorporated them in, I can now incorporate them in with this funding and test it further as well. So the minimum starting point is nobody has tested it outside the lab, but of course you can have smaller steps also further ahead. I'm still looking at any other questions. By university-led teams, does that mean the team should have at least one student? No. You can have students if you want. You can have no students if you want. It simply means that the lead person, the team leader, is from a university, is a faculty member in the university. Everybody else can be in the university or somewhere else, but the person who is in charge of the project must be a faculty member at in a university in one of our member countries. But you can have students if you want to. That is great, but it's not a requirement. I'm looking at the chat if there are any more questions. Please scroll up the chat or the Play Store app. You can download that. There's a lot more in the text than I can possibly go through in two-hour sessions. But I hope I've given you enough information or enough content just to sort of give some of the key things that we will be looking for, but in general reviewers look for, so that you can make your proposal fundable, given that all the other core content is good, the other areas that surround the core content that are there as well. With that, I will leave you here then. We'll make sure that the recording for yesterday and today are shared with you once they come up on the Zoom platform, and then you can refer to them. And again, thank you so much. And we really look forward to receiving your wonderful proposals in the next 40 days or so. Thank you very much.